got here. It's like either it's sunny or it's raining. And when it's
Well,
sunny, I want to be outside. And
well,
when
you
it's
can
raining,
you
I
can
want to
go
lay in
out in your
bed.
yard, Parker. Just don't go into anybody else's yard.
You're right.
So, no, I get you. It's rough. I'm recording, by the way. We'll share this later. Um, but it felt like it was worthwhile conversation to have on video as well too. So,
I do
uh,
have a question that's off topic though.
off topic or on topic,
It's
whatever
it's
the question is fine.
two words.
What is it?
Tiger King.
I haven't watched it yet. Have you?
Me neither.
No.
No.
Apparently, everybody else in the world has though.
Everyone else has, and they're
Yeah,
talking about it.
I have it on the to watch list. We'll see if it's any good. I don't know.
I want to hear. I want to hear from you how it is.
Yeah, I'm like there's lots of good stuff. I've been watching stuff that's very low drama, very. We've been watching Flea Market Flip. I think I mentioned this before. It's basically people go to the flea market and buy old rusty things, and they paint them to make them pretty, and then sell them at another flea market. It's yeah, spending hours watching it. So, um, so let's kind of do a quick check in on everybody. I know we're still missing a few people. Um, so last week we had talked about getting everybody everything that they're needing. A couple people were needing some hardware stuff. Met with a lot of people on Friday, one at a time, and socially distanced. We stood the appropriate 6 feet apart, and got them the stuff that they needed. Hopefully, is anybody still having any technical issues right now?
I'm getting a desktop.
Oh, cool. Uh,
Yeah.
did you like order one, or are you getting it?
Yeah, it's supposed to come on the 14th.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Well, just in time for graduation too,
I
so you
know.
get the. Now, so here's the thing: save the receipt for that,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
if you get
Remote PC is just it's really unstable for me. It just doesn't work well. So, I'm just kind of going to deal with my laptop and, until I get the desktop.
my understanding is a lot of what makes it slow is the time of day you're there as well.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
And if
definitely.
you're trying to log in right now, I think it gets a little buggy. If you try to log in later at night, it seems to be a little bit better. And I think that's some of the issues. So, um, but yeah, that kind of sucks. One of the things I was saying though is like, say this is a quick impromptu lecture. It, Park, Parker's gone rogue. He's
I'm making breakfast. You're good. I'm sorry.
you're making breakfast. What's for breakfast?
Oatmeal.
Oh no. Okay.
I already got it in the pot. I
That's
was
all right.
late to class, so I had to.
Oh, okay. Like maple and brown sugar, or you get some like strawberries in there.
Yeah, I'll show it to you when I'm done. I'm gonna
Okay.
improvise.
Okay. Swing it. So if you do buy anything technology based, especially if you're graduating soon, if you think you're going to be trying to do some work soon for people, keep in mind that once you start getting paid for this, particularly as an independent artist, those things become tax write offs. So like if you can do one contract piece this year, Carolyn, you can use that as a tax write off, and it basically it's let's say you spend $1,000 on a computer, and you do a job that's $500. Basically, you have now started a business that lost $500 this year. But the fact that you lost that $500 means you take that into consideration when you're doing your taxes, and it will be good for you to to do that. What ends up happening is independent contractors, people who are freelance artists, they get taxed at kind of a high rate, and like if you're working at like Walmart or something like that, they're already taking the taxes out throughout the year. What happens is when it comes time to pay taxes at the end of the year, if you're an independent contractor, you do all the math at the end of the year, and suddenly the government's like, you owe us $5,000. If they say that, like the way you're trying to reduce that is by saying this is a business expense, so I shouldn't be paying as much taxes, or I can, that's an exemption, not an exemption. I'm sorry. Anyway, you can write it off on your taxes and lower that amount that you would have to pay in taxes because it's a business expense. I mentioned that to a lot of people because I think that that's where the industry is heading. I know I do a lot of remote work for people, and
yeah, that was the biggest reason for wanting to get it, was because I'm about to graduate.
Yeah, save anything you buy, like anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like even if it's like a book, like an art book, that counts. Educational expenses counts. If you buy a stamp to mail a letter, that counts. Even if you are not mailing that letter to something about your business, you're just allowed to write off so much postage a year. So just save all of your receipts for everything, take them to an accountant, and they make your life way better. Anyway, that was a unforeseen impromptu.
That's very useful to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's definitely worth kind of looking into. I think that actually, well, I don't know if you heard my phone ding. It's a guy who is I got contacted by someone else just recently who's wanting me to do some contract work. It's a really small project. I think that we're going to start seeing a lot of that. Like, a lot of people are wanting to still continue to make products. I mean, there's a lot of people at home watching TV right now. They want to be able to sell stuff to those people. And so, I mean, I don't think the animation industry is going to slow down dramatically. And my expectation is this is going to make people a little more open to working with you remotely. And so, you may have to start thinking of yourself as a small business soon. So, or not have to, but you get the opportunity to. Okay, so it sounds like everybody hopefully has something there they can at least get started working on.
Can I ask about that, if that's okay?
Yes.
I thought of something to do, and it's not on the list. I thought about doing for this project, maybe try to tackle a first person animation, like Reload, or one of those I don't know what you call them, those other kind of reloads that are like those rare occurrences per se. Thought about doing something like that. I don't know if you have any opinions on that or steer away.
Like in an in-game setting?
Perhaps if I can get it to work in engine, that's what I want to do. But at least just figure out how that works. Just,
yeah.
If I do it.
Yeah, I think what I would try, because usually those are really short, pretty simple animations because they have to happen quickly. So do I think you could do it as a small set. You could do holding the gun, a single shot, like a quick 3-shot, and then a reload. And I think what I would try to do, because it should work in the same way we did the third-person character, you should be able to load in your first-person character into the first-person template, and then just replace the character in the little capsule thing. The problem with that is usually you have to use a character that doesn't have a head.
Okay.
And the reason for that is if it had a head, the camera would be inside the head mesh, right? Sure. So a lot of first-person characters are headless. So that is something you can kind of look into if you want to try it. But I think because those are really short, quick tests, I think that would be cool to give it a try. Cool.
See what I can come up with.
Yeah.
So if I did that route, do that kind of set, or there was this one I saw recently for Apex Legends where it was like an inspect animation for one of the characters. It was basically they did a knife trick, and I was like, dude, that's super cool. So I didn't know if I could just do one of those like longer ones, or if I should do the set. If that makes sense.
Oh, you mean like so? It was like a first-person character doing like some sort of like twirling a knife or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, send me some examples.
Okay.
I think that seems doable as something that's a. I mean, I think we can scale it however you want to do it. Like even if it's just a knife trick, like it's really that's just an animation that could trigger in game, and what you could have is sort of like an idle, and then trigger the knife trick or whatever that goes back to idle. Or something like that. So I mean, I think that there's a way we can scale it up just a little bit to make sure it's the the right amount of work to warrant for a project. But it seems doable. The issue with first person stuff is, for the most part, all of it's just hands, right? Like it's these really interesting hand animations. But I think if made complicated enough, is still a good show of your skills. So.
Okay, gotcha. I'm trying to like play around with some ideas and figure out what exactly I want to do.
Yeah.
So, but cool. Thank you.
Anytime. So, other questions on projects y'all are working on? Anybody having any technical issues right now?
So Maya either loves me or hates me. So during the weekend, I couldn't even open it. But yesterday it was acting fine.
Ooh.
So we will see.
We will see. Yeah. Yeah. Maya is like. Yeah, it's finicky. If you have some specific stuff it's doing, let me know. I may have some ideas on how to make it better. I have a feeling everybody's going to run into some stuff. The things that I always, if you're working from home, the things that usually seem to be big issues are either licensing things, like trying to get your licenses to work for the student stuff, or graphics card related. And so sometimes it's updating your graphics driver or changing some of the settings in Maya to where it works better with your graphics card. So yeah, if it's still continuing to do some stuff, like, send me some stuff. And I'm also, like, I've been trying to, last week was not a great example because Friday we had meeting after meeting, and I had to run a DTSU to get some people some equipment and stuff. But this morning I got on at like 8:30 in the morning, turned on Zoom, and actually one of the other students from the other class needed to meet and chat, so like we just chatted one-on-one in Zoom for a little while. Anytime you need to meet, I'll try to have this opened pretty often, but usually on Tuesday, Thursday mornings I'll open it up for sure before this class. And if for some reason you go there and I'm not there, you can send me a message, send me a text. I've got a lot of you in my phone now from where you've texted me recently. And just be like, hey, can we meet on Zoom sometime soon? Usually I try to shut down work Greg at about 5ish. That way I can have life Greg. And so I try not to sit at the computer very much after 5. I'm watching TV or cooking or doing something like that. But anytime during that time, if you need to meet up, we can arrange a time where we can just meet in Zoom and I can work with you one-on-one. In fact, that's probably what a lot of you who are in portfolio, so Parker, Tanner, who else in here? I'm sorry, I'm just looking through the list. Eli, Dylan, Amy, and Caroline. Any of you all who are needing to meet, I think I get everybody. If I skip somebody, like you two, but if y'all need to meet up for some portfolio mentor stuff, We have a spreadsheet now, is my understanding of how we're doing the keeping tracks of the mentor meetings. I'm trying to find that spreadsheet link again because I have 1,000 links for everything. But that spreadsheet link is how we're keeping track of who we've met with, and I can make sure that I'm marking you off on that. So, okay.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, uh, sorry.
Hi, fine.
Life Ramona was getting in the way for a second.
Oh, fair.
I actually I did want to make a comment. I also am still having some technical issues.
Okay.
Not to hamper on the same point, but remote PC is just not working for me in the slightest. I was using it pretty late yesterday. I was using it from like around 6 to 9 o'clock, and it just really wasn't working for me. It was super laggy. It was very unresponsive. It would take forever to transfer files between my hard drive and the computer, and like even just transferring it internally from like one folder to another, and it just was really performing very slowly. But I still can't get the student version of Maya to work for me, so I don't really know what to do about that.
What is the what's the student version of Maya doing?
Hold on 1 second. The idea that I found is basically just that I have the license for the student version, but for some reason, every time I log into Maya, it's recognizing the one on the one on the ETSU server, so it won't go onto the one that I have, even though I've re-downloaded it a couple times, and it just won't.
I actually had that same problem, and the thing that I figured out was I ran the Maya uninstaller, and then reinstalled the student version, and then it should ask for your the license that you got with your student version. It's working for me now.
I think that is what you're going to have to do. So what's happening is there's two different ways that Maya can get a license. One is through a server license, which is what we have at school, which is basically there's a file that's on the ETSU E3 server that Maya looks at to say this is what my license is. And then there's the other option, which is what you have as a student, which is you have a serial number or whatever that they send you through the email. I think Dusty's right. When they installed it on the image, they installed it and said, look for a license server. And I don't know why there's not just a button you can click that says no, instead this is a single seat server or a single seat license. But the only way I've ever figured out how to do it too is to completely uninstall Maya and then reinstall Maya and say single seat license when you're installing it the second time. Samira says, I am using student version of Maya for a year and it is working great. I never had any issues with that. Yeah, Samira, probably that's because I'm guessing if you're using it on a home computer, the first time you installed it, it said you probably installed it with the single seat license. So yeah, once you get that license working, you should have it. For I think 3 years with that license. And then the cool part about the student license is, you can download 2021 when it comes out too, and then you have that one for 3 years as well. So really, you have Maya for 3 years after you graduate. Is how that kind of works. And in all honesty, you can probably even get it after you graduate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll try out that option and see if it works. Thank you for that, Dusty.
Yeah.
Also, I hope you don't mind. I just made lunch, so.
Oh no, yeah, go for it. I would ask everybody here, because this is something some other people are having issues with, particularly Dusty and Ramona. Have you been able to get Adobe to work at all?
Oh, Adobe works with no problem. The first day I got this computer, all the Adobe stuff was working just fine. I was working in Premiere for a couple hours and didn't run into any issues. I got everything to work. It didn't require me. All it required me to do was to just log in as normal, and then that was it. Didn't have to do anything else.
Okay.
And then every other problem. Huh?
Oh, I'm sorry. Adobe's not working for me because I'm not on the school Wi-Fi, I think.
Yeah.
So it can't connect to the server.
Oh, that's
So,
interesting. Yeah.
For me, Photoshop works perfectly fine, but Premiere does not. And I have no idea why. Like, Premiere made me do like the 7-day free trial, but Photoshop opens up no problem.
Same, yeah. It was for me though. It's the opposite way, where Premium works, but Photoshop had that 7-day for me.
Gotcha. We have in my other section, Kat Hargis is trying to get Adobe to work, but she is using an ETSU computer off of the ETSU network, so very similar to what you have going on, Dusty. And she is just having a nightmare getting it to work. One of the things we tried, which was sort of a mistake, is we uninstalled all of the Adobe stuff and tried to reinstall it as the student version, and it just won't let her reinstall it as a student version because it's still doing the enterprise licensing. So anything that you all come up with that is working, Dusty, you may also want to kind of keep in contact with me and Marty, and I can get you hooked up with Kat as well. And once we figure out what's going on there, we can fix that. Eli Lewis as well. You may Eli, are you able to get Adobe to work on anything?
So I have it on my personal computer, but it's a Mac, and so it has the Mac version of all of those. So I can't really transfer my files except through like a small USB. So it's kind of like really roundabout, but I could do it, but I can't get it on the actual machine.
Okay.
The school one. I've been trying to work a way around it. I only started doing it last night though, so if I find something, I'll tell you guys.
Yeah, I mean, right now I have Kat trying to get a hold of Adobe, and just like somebody in Q or somebody in customer support for Adobe to try to see if we can work out what's going on there. Basically, what it is the university manages the license, and since she's not the admin on that computer, I don't think they're letting her change to a different type of license. So it's kind of very similar to what Ramona's having issues with Maya, but Maya just makes it easier. You just uninstall it and reinstall it. We can't apparently uninstall it on these computers. So,
yeah, I tried running it as an administrator, and it still didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Because you can, technically, you can do all the administrator stuff on these computers when they're off campus.
Oh, okay.
And I tried it, and it just did the same thing. It said you need to contact your IT department.
Yeah.
But it didn't like give me an administrator error that time. So.
Okay. Okay, that might be something to try. So yeah, we're working out all sorts of little things. In this case, though, if you're not needing to use Flash or whatever it's called, Adobe Animate, or any of that stuff, if you're just needing to edit some videos, and Adobe's giving you problems, my understanding is that DaVinci Resolve software is really nice. Todd got it to work. So there we go.
He hates it. Used it too much, but it looks pretty. I want to try to sit down and actually understand it, because it seems like a pretty good software from what I've viewed at. I think you can actually change the display to match with the editing softwares that you're more used to, because it asks you up front like, which software do you have the most experience with? And I use Premiere the most.
Yeah, my understanding, Todd sent an email out and said that he was able to get it to work, and Todd never does anything in video. It's like Todd hates video, anything pre-rendered. So like, if Todd got it to work, I think we can get it to work. So I think that we can. That is something that if you're just needing it for Premiere to edit some videos, I would consider just going that way instead of fighting with Adobe. Okay.
This might be slightly off topic, but it's still computer issues.
Okay.
I still haven't gotten the Microsoft Office programs to work online. I also tried the whole installing, uninstalling thing, but I ran into a bunch of issues where it said I didn't have access or something like that. It just wouldn't allow me to get the stuff back on. like I can use them in a very weird version on the OneDrive website.
Yeah.
But I can't, like, if I have any actual files, I can't view them on my computer for some reason, and it's very weird.
So one of the things you can consider is OpenOffice as an alternative to it, and they'll open doc files and Excel files, but it's just a third-party software. I haven't used OpenOffice in a while. There's a couple of different versions. There's Apache OpenOffice, and then there's let's see, OpenOffice.org. What's the different ones? Yeah. So basically, it's just an open source version of the Office software. So they have a word processor, spreadsheet, a presentation program, and then I think they have a database manager as well. But the cool part about it is it will still open. The native formats, and it'll still let you save to the native formats. The only issue is the formatting's a little different in how the software works. And if you have any like plugins or anything that you're using, like I use Grammarly in Word, I don't think Grammarly will work in OpenOffice. There's also the Google Docs stuff too, but that would require you to upload them and convert them. So.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of just what I've been using now.
Yeah.
Using Google Drive stuff.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm gonna mute this. So yeah, I think that so it sounds like we're getting close, and hopefully, I don't know about you all, but I got nothing done last week. Let me rephrase that. I got lots done. None of it was actually the stuff that I needed to get done for class or for work or any of that stuff. It's all been a week of just jumping through hoops and figuring out how my desktop is going to be set up. I need to show you all my current setup here is that I have my so I can pull back here, my big monitor right here, right? And then on top of my tower, I have another monitor up here.
Whoa!
Because my desk isn't big enough to have two side by side because my wife's desk's right there. And so I've had to
you get to go to work with your wife. That's sweet.
No, actually, she has to go to work. Like she works at a doctor's office, so they make her come in every day. There's my books. I keep books over there.
Good books.
And a bunch of Tennessee flag stuff. And then there's a map of my house. Here's my front yard. It's over here. It's out there.
I love how you post like time
Hey,
lapses of your yard.
Oh yeah, the backyard stuff.
It's so peaceful when you play like calming music.
Yes, Sierra?
Okay, if I ever need to shoot reference again, can I just sneak into your backyard?
What's in my backyard that you need? But yeah.
Neighbors, so don't stare at me.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you watch the video, you can see some random guy smoking out on his porch, just staring at me the entire time.
I promise you, my neighbors will be way more judgy.
Sierra, I will promise you, I've done far more embarrassing videos shot in backyards than you have.
There's we all like I think we all have some pretty embarrassing situations. But yeah, you're welcome. I got 6 acres. You can run to your heart's content.
Forrest always chooses to use some of his reference at the very end of his demo reel. He did just a recent one, and he put his reference in there, and I'm like, he's brave. Like I couldn't.
Forrest is he's very athletic too, though. Like he could be a motion capture artist if the motion capture subject if he needed to be.
I would love to do that actually.
I would hate to do that. Like any of that.
It would be fun. Like I just want to try it out just one time. And just see it'd be so cool. Is there a whole career? Could you make that your whole career, motion capture?
Sure.
I thought they just put actors. Like I didn't know like there were specific like just motion capture.
Yeah, I think so. I think that there's yeah, I don't know how prevalent it is or what the route to that is, but there are some studios that do enough motion capture to make that a reasonable thing. I'm sure like Call of Duty has their own studio that has a dedicated staff of people running around with like plastic guns and stuff.
That'd be so cool.
Okay, well I'm going.
Do you remember when Robert Zemeckis had his motion capture studio?
No.
Image movers.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Image movers? Yeah.
Oh, is that
was
the
Image Movers.
Is that
Those
the one?
Who did Polar Express, Monster House, Christmas Carol, and Bars Needs Moms. Monster House is the best one. I will defend that movie. That movie's really good.
It is pretty.
I kind of like the Jim Carrey one. Like I think that one's a pretty decent adaptation. You can forget every other film they did.
I have emotional ties to Polar Express. It was one of the first movies me and my wife went and watched together. So, like at a theater. So,
I mean,
yeah, we all had bad dreams after it was over with, but it was good.
I was 8.
I still watch that movie every year. I don't like it, but it's one of those things where like you watched it when you were a kid, so it feels weird not watching it again, even though you don't like it.
Okay, so let's go ahead and hop into some stuff. I'm going to share my screen really quick here. Share. There we go. So I did want to talk just kind of briefly here. Hopefully this is still working out all right for y'all. Online class content. I'm putting links in here just as new posts every day, or not every day, but every time we have an update. I'll put one in there for the class stuff today. I also put a couple of links to some 2D animation stuff in here. So I don't know why they are so small, but using Adobe Animate or OpenTunes, I found a couple of tutorials, and I think Ramona shared some stuff on the Discord.
Yeah,
about that as well.
I had issues with one of the tutorials you put in.
Yeah.
Because it required you to download something to actually use to actually do anything, and the website didn't work.
Okay, I just kind of skimmed them, so I may have missed that then. So the other thing I wanted to kind of look at really quickly is just our schedule to see where we are. It's nice to always just remind ourselves like we are on a schedule working through this. Today is the 31st, so we are right there, and I am going to do a revision lecture today. So we're going to be talking about that here in just a few minutes, and I'll just sort of share some stuff on the screen to work through that. The revision lecture is kind of targeted toward people who are repeating the class, but good for people who are taking it the first time, because I think it has some techniques that a lot of people end up using that they didn't foresee using. So what I'd like to start seeing in this week's discussion, in the homework discussion, is at least some blocking. I looked at the discussions, I think yesterday, but it was probably like 4 or 5. And I know Sunday, but it was like 4 or 5. And so I know there's some people who probably hadn't posted everything yet. But I wanted to make sure that I was clear on how it's working, in that you should be posting your initial post by Thursday. So posting something for people to review by Thursday. And then people should be commenting by Sunday. Not posting your initial post by Sunday. Because if you do, like, people are just going to move on, and you're not going to get any feedback, and it's really not a helpful exercise at that point. So I'll make the post for that after this class, so it'll be up there. And I think I may go ahead and go a little bit further ahead there too, and get some of those others in there relatively soon. But pretty much they're all going to be a similar setup, right? It's of this week. You just have to, by Sunday of this week. By the Sunday of this week is when you need to have everything in there. How did that work for y'all? Any feedback on that?
I do definitely think it was helpful for me. It's just, I mean, the biggest issue was just I live in a very tiny apartment, so shooting reference and being able to get like good full body reference is very hard to do. But I took a lot of the feedback that I got, and I tried to do something better for second go arounds. And I got some. I did get something a little bit more usable that I have for my blocking pass. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me see what she's talking about. So, okay, cool. Yeah, hopefully getting the reference. Yeah, again, I know everybody's in a different situation. It was really interesting seeing all of your houses when y'all are shooting reference. Occasionally, some family members showing up as well. So all of that was neat. Hopefully, you were able to get some stuff, and I think just looking through it, there was some really good stuff you had going on there. Having said that, looking at this, if this is where we are today, like we kind of need to start hitting this pretty hard to get the shot done in time. Okay, my wife just sent me a message about something just came out in Johnson City Press today about ETSU. I think this may be. Oh, it was the virtual town hall thing. So some of you already seen some of that. If not, you may want to go back and watch it. I haven't watched all of it yet. But basically, they're working with the housing and meal plans to refund the students. And they said the quote is likely moving to pass-fail grading system. I don't know if that's being quoted correctly. I know a lot of people had questions about that yesterday in the Discord. I can answer if anybody has questions about that, I can answer what I understand of it so far based off of what has been told to me, not because I've actually read the document in depth. But my understanding is how it's going to work is you can elect to go pass-fail. And unless they change the way that's working, what that means is I still grade all of these, and let's say you have a C plus at the end of this, that's a pass, right? If you have a C minus, that's a fail. Right? I don't know if it's a fail or not. I know a D would be a fail. You have to have above a C minus to move on to the upper level classes. So I'd assume they would count that as a fail. But the point of that, I think, is so it's not as much of an impact on your GPA. But there are some issues with that based off of how financial aid operates. So, for example, your scholarship may want to see a GPA for this semester, and I don't know how GPAs work with pass-fail. So that's going to be a Deborah question. It's actually on my my to-do list to contact Deborah and see if she can explain it to me a little bit better. But does anybody have any more information on that or any other insight on that?
As far as I know, pass-fail, it only affects your GPA if you fail. So if you pass, like, it doesn't change it at all. It doesn't boost it. But yeah, if you fail, then you do take a hit. But you get up to, so grades come out, and then my knowledge of it is that once the grades come out up until like June something, you can request through your advisor, like, hey, can I get this changed to the pass-fail? And then it has to go through Marty, I'm guessing, because he's the chair.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah.
Yeah. So my understanding though is I'm not the one who gives you a grade of pass-fail though. It's basically the system will say this is a pass for your department or this is a fail for your department. And I think it's really just a way so you can have more control over how this affects your transcript and your GPA. I mean, obviously, like some people, are having issues with online access and stuff like that, and hopefully it will give people that option to reduce that impact if necessary. So yeah. Anyway, that's the message my wife just sent about that. I hadn't seen about the meal plans and all of the refunds for that stuff. But that's cool. I'm glad they are. I thought that's what they would do. But. Okay, so where we are right now is right here. We have approximately 1, 2, 3.5 weeks to get the Pantomime project done, or to get Project 3 done for those of you who are doing something different. So I think to stay on track for that, we do need to kind of start kicking it into high gear. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say none of you have really started blocking very much yet. You may have said a key or two. Am I incorrect? There's a chance all of you.
I do have a blocking pass.
Oh, cool.
I'm about halfway through.
Oh, goodness. Y'all showing me. Okay. Well, that's cool.
I started working on my revision Sunday.
All right, good. Well, so I think we, now hopefully everything is kind of lined up a little bit better. We have all of our hardware, most of our hardware and software issues working out. That's where the sort of the hard part starts for us, which is we have to try to learn how to, or try to figure out how to build focus. And I know it's distracting. I know where you're at right now is at the same place that you play Animal Crossing. It's the same place where you like to read Harry Potter. Right? It's very hard to turn on school from your house. So try. But I think there's a couple of things you can consider, and I would say that one of the best ways to me to do this is to put yourself on a schedule. Pretend you're going to school even if you're not going to school, or pretend that you're going to class even if you're not getting up and actually going to class. To me, if I just roll out of bed and go sit down in my chair, I'm going to browse social media or watch YouTube videos for 5 hours, right? If I get up, I eat breakfast, I take a shower, and then I go sit down in my chair, I start feeling like I'm at work, right? I'm okay, just like I would if I went into my office, or just like if I went into class. So, sort of getting a routine that is all right, I am going to go to work. I must be at work at 9 o'clock. And, sort of planning on being there. The other end of that is realizing that I always said I used to work from home a lot. That was before I became a teacher, before I started working at Firaxis, I worked remotely exclusively for probably about 4 years. And the phrase I always used was working from home is the same thing as sleeping at work. Right? It's really hard to turn work off. So, or to turn work on, right? And I think that one of the tricks to that is to make work a location, or to make work a thing you can turn on and off. And so this is something you may have to sort of get your own practice on how to do this. For me, this office I'm in right now, this is the get stuff done place. And when I stand up and leave, I'm not getting stuff done anymore, right? I'm going to go through the living room. I'm going to watch TV. I'm going to hang out. I'm going to maybe, play around and work on something in the basement. But I'm not going to reply to emails, right? The alternative to that is, or the sort of vice versa of that is, when I come into my office and sit down, it's to do work, right? So this is my workplace, right? So that might help you. If you can have your computer set up in a corner that you only go to when you're working, and then you can watch YouTube videos in a different spot. Even if you have to physically move your computer, maybe you're using a laptop or something like that. Maybe it's your chair. Maybe when you're sitting in your office chair, that's the get work done spot. Maybe you pull a beanbag in, and that's your watch YouTube chair, right? one of the options my wife I tried for a little while that actually did work is a literal hat, like you put on your work hat, right? And that, like, you'd be surprised, like that something like that, to say, okay, when I have this hat on, I'm working. When I take this hat off, I'm not working. I think that what that does is gives you a feedback loop to see that I'm not wearing that hat very often lately, or I'm not sitting in my recliner or whatever. Like, you can start to see when you're not getting that good work home balance. Hopefully that's helpful. I think the other thing is maybe support groups of people. Like, you can, in the same way that you would come into the lab with a friend to work, we have the Discord channel going. Get a chat going with somebody, or you can get Zoom yourself, right? Like, you can get a free version of Zoom, or there's another software that's I think it's called Jitsi, JITSI. That's just a free web conferencing software. Be like, hey, there's a couple people want to work from 5 to 8 tonight, and get the Zoom meeting open, and just chat while you're working. It's like that's your work group, your study group, right? Anybody have any other ideas that may be helpful for people who might be fighting with that?
I think also one thing that could help a lot, maybe just because, like, I'm speaking personally, I think also keeping regular habits that you used to do during, like, the regular school methods going even during this period. Like, I still have class alarms for everything I do. I'm trying to work out counseling, because that was a regular thing I used to do every week or every other week. So, like, just keeping routines that you're used to will help still get you in that mindset of, like, oh, I am in school, I do school things.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. Something else that, this may help you, especially if you've worked other jobs before where you had to clock in and clock out. You can make a spreadsheet. Like, I make spreadsheets for everything, as you can see. Make a spreadsheet with every day's date on it, and before you start working, type in the time. Like, it's like, okay, it's 2 o'clock right now, and I'm going to work until 4, or I'm going to work until 5. And that way you can actually start to see it. If you're like, this spreadsheet's not filling up as fast as I would like, then you can make an extra effort to put that time in. Really, the hardest part of this is, for a lot of you, will be the free reign of the fact that class is in your bedroom, right? The fact that, and this is not something that you're just going to have to deal with now. It was something I ended up dealing with when I graduated from college, because suddenly I didn't have a routine. I didn't have anything to keep me in line. It was very easy for me to sleep until 1 o'clock in the evening, or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and not get anything done. And so, like, trying to get something that kind of regular and maintain your regular routines are pretty helpful, even if that means you have to set an alarm and make yourself wake up to do it. Hopefully that's one of the reasons I like doing these regular Zoom meetings like this. I know a lot of people are making them optional. I like doing them because it gives us something to meet up with, even if I know I'm blabbing on and on and on, and some of you are probably bored and scrolling through YouTube right now.
Excuse me, I could never be bored of you, Greg. Okay. Consider that an insult.
Okay. Everybody says as they quickly close down their YouTube page. But I think it is.
We love you. You're great.
I love you all too. So
I love listening to you, man.
Well, I think that this will be handy just to have this to come to, and the fact that so many people are here is good. Like, I've heard some of the other teachers saying, like, the number of people showing up for the classes are a little lower, And I think that you all showing up every day is like at least going to keep you in this routine. Like sitting here thinking about character animation will hopefully be good for you to stay on track. So having said that, though, this is where we're at. We probably should like sort of kick that into high gear. And so I'm going to go ahead and leave this as blocking and stepped is what is due by the end of this, or by Thursday. I know that that means some of you are just going to have a few poses. That's okay. I shared a video a while back about blocking and what that really means. So that means your blocking pass may really just look a little bit more like a layout pass, but really what I would like to see is that you're starting to get some poses created. Now, again, we're headed toward pantomime. The thing I want to recognize is that, we got a lot of time to work on this project 3. We got a very short amount of time to work on project 4. So I really want to hit project 4 ready to go, right? So if you in your spare time, if you want to start looking for lip sync audio clips, again, we're probably going to shorten that down to something like 5 seconds, and something very similar to what we're seeing of each other right now, like chest up, waist up, something like that, is what your shot is going to look like, and that way you can mainly focus on the face and maybe an arm gesture or two, right? In fact, it could kind of be funny to put them all together once it's all done into a Zoom meeting and just like have them all hanging out, talking to each other. Okay, so I'm going to move this over to here. Wait, there we go. And I'm going to open this. So what I'd like to spend some time talking about today is revisions. So again, if you are in the repeating class or the repeat of this class, this is what you are. This is what one of your projects is. I know some of you have already started it. This is the shot we've been working on project 1. So you all remember it. Can you all see my screen? Who's playing? Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Playback, real time. So this is roughly where I was at. I think there's still a couple little things I need to polish on this. And I know it's probably playing back a little slow. Playback caching work? Yeah, I think it might. Oh, it won't play it backwards. Yeah, that's filling right. So the reason I pull this one up is because this is one that feels like closer to done, right? And so when we talk about a revision of something, I think that that's a really hard thing to wrap your mind around. Like, what does that mean? The hardest part is how do you even get started, right? And so I think the one of the takeaways from today's talk is that sort of the enemy of being able to do a good revision is caution. And I know that sounds like antithetical to what you may be thinking, but you should not hesitate at all to select every control in this rig. Let's see, do I have a... I thought I had one. Okay. To select every control in this rig and be willing to wipe out whole sections of keyframes, right? Being overly cautious and being like, well, maybe I'll only delete this one keyframe, is really means you're going to make these really small increments of progress. And what we're wanting to do is be able to completely revise something, completely change something. So I wanted to talk about a couple of different techniques that we can use for that today. Do I have the Kayla? Let me just grab her controls here. Okay. Show none. Show show NURBS curves, and then I'll grab all of these, and then I use a set of tools. This is the AnimBot tools we've talked about before, and that just allows me to make a quick picker for everything. And then I can turn these back on. Okay, so there's probably two or three things that I usually try when it comes to revising something. The first element of this, though, is figuring out what is wrong with it, right? And so most of this is just sort of showing, most of today's lecture is just showing these techniques or tools that you can use to revise something that makes a big impact, right? So the first thing you do is you need to be completely honest with yourself about what is communicating or what is not communicating. Yeah, you're cutting out, Caroline. Sorry, try one more time. What was it?
Samira asked if you could make the Maya screen bigger.
I can do like, you want to do like that?
I don't think it's full screen.
I can do this. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me just minimize you all then. Wait, maybe not minimize. Let's do like that.
Hey Greg, are you recording this?
I am.
Once it's recorded, are you just gonna put it on your YouTube?
Yeah, probably. Is that all right?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I knew where to find it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I will do is after every class, once I've uploaded everything, I will put, like, wherever I put it, it will be on the course content under this online class content, and then I'll just post a new class video with the day's date. So I'm pretty sure it'll go to YouTube though, because I am recording it with D2L or with Zoom. No, OBS. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let me go ahead and show where are my controls? There we go. So, so one of the things you can, the first thing you need to do is sort of an assessment of this, right? Assessment of what needs to be improved. In most cases, you're going to come up with one of a few different problems. So let's say it's a posing problem, right? That there's like this pose here. I really just do not like how her head is angled, right? That might be the problem that we run into. It may be like a small problem, like arcs, right? Like the way the arc is going from here to here, right? Maybe I want to increase that leg's arc. So some revisions are really easy changes. It's really just I'm already at my blocking plus phase, or I'm already at my splining phase, and it just needs another revision pass, right? And that stuff is pretty easy to handle. Like this is an example here where that foot's at is just not creating a nice arc. I could go in and just sort of change that on a single keyframe, and maybe sort of change the way this is flowing from frame to frame here to get a better arc out of that, right? Those are not as hard as some more major changes, and I think one of the reasons I wanted to do this lecture was because those are the kinds of changes that you have to be able to do in a studio, right? So like, what if the change was something way more general, right? Like she needs to seem scared, right, through the whole thing, and you're like, I mean, does that mean you start over? Does that mean you have to completely repose everything, right? So getting to the root of what the problem is without thinking about how you're going to solve it is the first step, identifying the problem, right? So let's say that the problem in this one is that I really don't like the way. Sorry, I need to frame this a little better. So, is this? Can you still see this? Okay. Because I need to be able to see like her whole in the whole frame here.
Yeah.
So, like, let's say what I really want is I want her to run up this tree differently, right? Like, I want her, I'm okay with all of this part in the beginning, but let's say maybe I want her to do a giant jump from here to this point here, right? That's where those changes, like, are harder to figure out where to even start, right? And that's where when I'm saying you need to be sort of fearless about that, that's where you do this. Like, if I know I'm okay with frame 41, and I know that I'm okay with frame, let's say, 18, then I'm going to select everything, hit S on frame 18, and go to frame 41, hit S, and then I am just going to wipe out all of that in between. Right? And basically what I'm doing for this revision is saying this part here, we're just back to the basics. I have to rekey that. I have to make this in a pose-to-pose sort of way do exactly what I want it to do. Right? So maybe what I really wanted was her to hit this part and sort of jump up in the air and land in this pose, right? So then I could go through here and completely rekey this entire character to make that happen, right? I would have to do the she jumps sort of straight up in the air. And this is a revision that maybe would require me to get some more reference as well, right? So let's try something like this here, though. This is just a quick example of it. Maybe I'm not happy with the head. Something like this. Clear up that silhouette a little bit more. Why am I able to select her geometry? There it is. So we could do something a little bit more like this, and now I get her hitting here, doing this jump up in the air. I would probably have to figure out a contact pose through here on everything, right? Get her to have a landing pose that is closer to this. I'm just roughing this in though. Right, then maybe she does like a quick jump up in the air, lands there, and then does the flip, right? So I know that this is, I'm not going to end up revising this whole shot in this method, but the point of this is that is to think of this like if you're peeling potatoes, right, or peeling a banana, right, and you hit a spot that has a bunch of like mold on it or rotten, it's just rotten or bruised, right? Like, you're not just going to, like, poke at that forever. You're just going to chop it out and use the rest of the potato, right? Or banana or whatever. That's the same thing here. If there's something that's not working, you're going to waste hours of time trying to fix something that has a bad foundation, right? The trick to it is to wipe that out and fix the foundation first. And this little section here, if you look at that, 18 to 41, that is just a little over 20 frames of animation, right? Even if I had to set keyframes for every frame of that, I could do that in just a few hours, right? I could make those 20 frames perfect, right, if everything else is working well, right? So the problem with that is a lot of people are really scared to do that. A lot of people are scared to just chop out a chunk of their animation. This works again in terms of 2D as well. Like if you have a section that's not working, like you can just delete some frames. Like the cool thing about this is you've lost nothing, right? As long as I don't save over my file, as long as I increment and save, I still have that version I had before. And I think that's one of the ways that you work on the fearlessness of this is by recognizing you have a safety net, right? You have the ability to go back to where you were, as long as you don't save over the file. So save a new file and don't overwrite this one. So that's how you would fix something that is a rotten spot in your animation. I'm going back to my previous version that I had before, because that's not always the problem. Sometimes the problem is the entire animation. That one's a little harder. If the entire animation is the problem, it's still a similar method that you would go about to fix this, right? I did that thing again. Show none. So, if it's the entire animation, that's where people really struggle. And the reason is because the shot you're coming back to revise is probably a shot that you have already taken through a splining pass and all of that stuff. So that means your current shot is none of the keys are lining up. Like if I look at my keyframes here, like from frame 4 to frame 38, I have a keyframe literally on every frame. 4 to 38. The same from like this stretch through here, this stretch through here. That is so painful to go back and change. I can do it one control at a time, and by using my greater than, less than keys just to sort of step through. And if I wanted to just control, let's do like the hips, right? If I wanted to control what the hips are doing on each of these keys, I could step through it and find it, or I could go through and start finding stuff in the graph editor. But really, the problem that people have at this stage is that they start making these really small graph editor changes when the problem is still foundational. The problem is still that the animation itself has some underlying fundamental issues, right? Maybe if you splined a bunch of bad key poses, no amount of splining and editing in the graph editor is going to make those key poses better, right? The fact is that it was just built on a crumbly foundation, and the only real way to fix it is to strip it back down to that foundation. So, there is a method of doing that to where you're not starting over from scratch. Right? For me, what I do with that is I start saving poses that are moderately salvageable, right? So let's say frame 1 and the character is off screen. That one's perfectly fine, right? Maybe I want to save my contact pose here, frame 5. So I'm selecting everything, all of my controls. I'll hit S, and that means frame 1 and 5 are fine. I don't need frame 4 anymore, so I'll delete that. All right. Let's say the next pose, as I scrub through here, that I'm okay with is my other contact pose right here, frame 15. So I can select everything again, hit S, and I'm just going to start wiping that out, start deleting the keys that are not the OK keys, right? And really what I'm doing is I'm getting back to my blocking pass at this point, right? I have my off frame, contact, right? And so now I can go through and start reposing the parts that are missing. Really what I'm doing is I'm taking a bad splining or a bad blocking plus pass, and I'm stripping that back down to blocking, right? And then I can do a revision on the blocking, and that will allow me to spline that and polish that better. Right? I know that sounds like painful to do, especially if it's a piece that is relatively like relatively new to you or relatively like recent, and you feel like you've already put so much work into it. I think that's the reason to do it, is you've already put so much work into it. There's no amount of polishing that's going to fix that. If you want it to ever be a good piece, you have to take it down to the foundation and make that foundation strong again. Is that making sense? Hopefully. Okay.
Yeah.
It's weird because I can't look around the class to see if it feels like, because you'll be surprised how much of teaching is responding to how the class is reacting. It's really hard. So if you need to slow me down, if I'm being too boring, like poke me and be like, go faster, Greg.
I can't even begin to tell you how many times I've gone through pieces and just chopped entire bits out during revisions and during the animation process itself. I constantly do it.
Oh yeah,
and it helps a lot.
Well, I think the thing about it is recognizing that this is not a remedy for a mistake. This is a workflow, right?
Yeah.
This is not like I messed something up and now I have to apologize and go fix it. Like this is something that you have to learn how to do every day, and just how you have to not be reluctant to open the graph editor. If somebody's like, that section isn't working, you have to be okay being like, all right, it's gone. What do we need to do to make that better, right? That is because sometimes like iteration it's not a personal attack. It's not, I don't like your work. It is, that's not working for what we need. And no matter how emotionally tied you are to it, we have to make the thing that is what we need, right? And so being able to roll with that and make those changes quickly is important. Yeah, Romano, you were saying something?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I've heard a lot of professionals mention things like that. Chuck Jones used to say, like, he would talk to his animators a lot of times when he would, like, hand him scenes. He'd be like, this is a good scene. This will work for this guy. This will work for this guy. But it doesn't work for me. So they would have, like, sometimes the animators would just have to change scenes, and they could be good scenes, but they would have to redo it again because it just doesn't fit what the director's going for.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Well, and I think one of the hardest things to, once you're in a studio environment, one of the hardest things is that sometimes you do an animation that is better than the animation that was needed. And the answer is like I've done it before. I'd do this really cool like attack animation, and it looks awesome. I'm like, this is going to be one of my portfolio pieces. And then I submit it, and they say, oh, that's a cool shot and everything, but this needs to be a lot faster and more simple because something else is going on during this time. We just need this to be just a generic punch. And I'm like, really? I have to delete my really cool animation and do something that's less cool? And to serve the purpose of the project at large, sometimes the answer is yes. You hear this in film sometimes. A character, let's say you're working on a character that is, a predominant character in the shot or in the film. There are certain gestures that the director is sometimes saving for a very important shot, right? Like if your character is frustrated a lot, right, is always a frustrated character, and you do your blocking pass, and somewhere in there you use this like pose, right? No matter how good that shot is, the director may be saving that emotion, that pose, for a very key scene in the movie, right? And even if it works well with your shot, that doesn't mean that it serves the overall good. And so you have to. This is part of a workflow, not a band-aid for a mistake. Like this is something you have to be ready to do. Is like, let me wipe that out and completely redo that. And so revision. That's why I like having a revision lecture built into this class, is because even if you're not ready to revise an older piece because you're taking the class the first time, it is good to know that this is the mindset that you need to be in as you work. Sorry, I'm just checking the time. So let's reopen the previous file. There's a couple of other little tools I want to show you all. One you probably are familiar with, but if not, it's something that you should consider using. It's the retiming tool. Anybody ever used the retiming tool in here?
Is it in the graph editor with the yellow line things?
Yeah, the graph editor retiming tool.
It never works for me correctly.
Well,
it bogs everything down and messes it. It's easier for me to just grab all the keyframes and move them.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of put it in here, is because when it works, it's great. If you have a really complicated rig, though, sometimes it doesn't work. Let's see if it'll work this time. So I'll show you how it works. When it does work, it's great. Right? So again, I did that thing again, didn't I? Show NURBS controls, scoot her forward, grab everything. Oh, show, grab everything. Sorry. All. Show. So I'll show you one of the reasons that sometimes it doesn't work. But with all of my controls selected, I want to make sure I have every curve selected. So I'll select the top one, scroll all the way to the bottom, hold down Shift, so everything is selected. So the retiming tool, I'll move you all over to this side. So the retiming tool is this thing right here. Right? And so this is a really nice tool for a lot of stuff. So I will click it, and let's say I wanted to make this section through here. Like, one of the things I kind of notice is that this section to me just sort of has some timing issues, right? Everything between frame 42 and maybe 14, right? So the retiming tool, I can double click and add that, and then I can go to like 42, or I can scrub it here, right? And I can double click in here, and the retiming tool should let me just slide this whole thing. But as you see, it does get a little boggy, right? It sort of slows down. Now, it's still worth using, even if it's just a little slow. Like, use it anyway. Now, one of the cool things about it is that I can have multiple points. So, like, if I need this part to be a little faster, but I need it all to still be the exact same length, by scaling this in means it's going to scale this down, right? And you'll see something that I think is pretty cool is Maya 2020 now has the auto align, auto snap thing. So when I do this, it's going to try to snap all my keys to whole keys now, which is so much better than what it used to do, right? But let's say if what I did need is just that whole section to the middle right here to be faster, hopefully now just using that retiming tool. Okay, so what it did do though is it made my flip way slower, right? Like this is way slow now to the landing there, which means I could add in another one here, right? And scrunch that in, and then of course sort of rework the timing here. So whatever my timing needs to be, I can kind of use this tool to rework it and make it work the way I want it to. But you're right, sometimes the retiming tool just doesn't work at all. Like if you try to use that at all, everything crashes or freezes or whatever. So keep in mind that it's not the only way of doing it, right? As I showed you before, like let's say you can't use the retiming tool. Again, I think the key to all of this is being a little bit fearless about it, right? If I'm just like, this section here feels too slow or too fast. Let's say for example, this section feels too fast now, right? Well, what I can do is just grab all of this, slide that down, grab these keys, scale it, right click, snap. Right? Now, by doing that, I guarantee you I messed up some curves. But in that name of being sort of fearless about it, I know that I'm a good animator and I can fix those curves again, right? And I think that's the trick, is knowing that you are capable of making or fixing anything that you break, right? Means that you feel more freedom to just do whatever you need to do, whether you break it or not, right? You can always fix it. Some of the things that does help with that sometimes is having some extra tools at your control, that you can do stuff a little easier, right? So slowly you'll start to learn like the things that you struggle with, like FK/IK switching or arcs or whatever, and don't hesitate to download scripts or to use like sets of tools that will help with that. So for me, a really handy set of tools that I'm using, this Animbot tools, right, are all of these easing tools that I have here. And again, this is not something you have to own, right? But like this curve here, like that's just a messy curve as it goes up that way. One of the benefits of these tools is I know that it has this easing control, that I can just grab those and I can change the easing altogether with that, right? It's got a lot of little tools in there with it as well. So for example, let's find something a little flatter here that I can show you. Let's grab her arm. Let's say that I wanted her arm to have sort of a shake in it, right? For some reason. There's some of these tools in here that I know exist that I can sort of use this to add some more keyframes to it. I can use this wave and noise to add some noise to it. And then I can sort of smooth that a little bit if I need to, right? And so with that, I can add like a little like wobble to that arm, right? Not that that's something I need, but like I use that for like little head shakes or little like, little shimmies or jitters that people do. So creating the tools that you can reuse a lot, that will help save you time, is also another way to feel a little bit more fearless about making these big sweeping changes, because you can still get back to something good. So, timing is something that a lot of people have issues with, though, especially when you go back and do a revision. It's so easy to just start accepting the timing that your animation has, and then you end up with a piece with bad timing. So timing is something that a lot of people have usually need to do a revision pass on. Okay, any questions up to this point? Because we're getting ready to go into something different.
I'm good.
Okay.
Looking good, Greg.
Okay, thank you.
Looking good.
Looking good, Greg. I like that glass, by the way. What was that?
We got this at the Dollar Tree. It's got lemons on it.
It looks like a cool
lemon.
Like old antique glass kind of.
Nope, just cheap.
That's really cute. I like that.
Yeah, so our kitchen. Oh, now I've messed up the focus on my camera.
I'm just every time I think of lemons, I'm just reminded of that one Simpsons episode where like the neighboring neighborhood steals the Springfield lemon tree,
Yeah.
and then it's the one scene that's like, "Now, if you don't mind me, I'm gonna have me some lunch." And he eats the lemon.
I think that there's a scenario for like every Simpsons episode to fit in for a reference. Like, oh, this moment reminds me of that one episode of Simpsons.
It's that and SpongeBob. It's one of those two.
Yeah.
So, no, I mean, I'll let my wife know that you like that glass, though. So we painted our kitchen yellow. I'll have to give you all a house tour here someday, and let you see the house. So.
I'll give you a house tour too.
Yeah, well, we just saw most of it when you went to make your oatmeal. So.
Am I the only one in the chat who's ashamed of their house?
Oh no, mine's a mess. Like ours is like, here you go.
I mean, I can show you all the
our
dumb stuff
garbage,
Nathan owns.
like,
We have a
sitting right here.
machete. You guys want to see a machete?
Ooh, machetes are cool.
He keeps it underneath our bed for no apparent reason. So now you know. Don't break into our house. We'll machete kill you.
No, well, I mean, like, yeah, if there's an intruder, you want the machete within arm's reach.
So that you can chop someone with the machete.
It's a really dull. I shouldn't be telling you. It's a very dull machete, so it probably wouldn't even cut you. It's mostly just for like the fear.
Nobody wants to be
swinging a machete around.
Nobody wants to be hit with a dull machete either.
Okay, this is off topic, but remember that in the Spy Kids, their Uncle Machete, he had his own like R-rated movie. And he had a cameo in a kids movie.
Yeah, it's like a theory that it's a connected universe.
I swear it is. Like,
I've never watched any of the Spy Kids movies. I know.
They're okay.
They came out when I was in college, and I was not the target demographic.
Greg, I forget how old you, like, much older than you are than me.
I'm an old man.
I was like 5.
Be nice to Greg. He's not
old.
I'm old.
You're like, oh, and
I like turquoise lava girl.
He's not. He looks like
Shark boy in like theaters.
He looks like he's 5 years older than us. That's what I'm getting at.
I appreciate that, Parker. I'm getting a lot of gray in my beard, though. It's getting gray. So, all right. So, we're gonna hop onto one more tool here, and this is the one that I remember the first time I taught this lecture, Parker freaked out. So, you remember? You may remember this. So.
Oh, I know you're gonna do.
Okay. So, has anybody in here ever used animation layers before?
I have.
I tried to.
Okay.
That's what 2D is all about.
2D.
I was going to research that.
So,
I use it for like tails or ears sometimes.
Yeah. So, animation layers are nice because they work differently than you might think. They don't work like layers do in something like Photoshop or even like a 2D animation program, right? Show curves, grab those all. I should just save the one where I've made this selection set. And then I will change this to my graph editor here. So animation layers don't work like a 2D layer, right? They are layers of motion, right? So let me actually open up a new version of Maya just to show you sort of how this works as a tool. And we can do it with something a little more simple. So let's see here. Let's create a sphere. We always start with a sphere. No, close that. So animation layers, you're going to find these over here. You get your channel box layers. We got our display layers, and what we're looking for is animation layers. So if we open this up, it looks like we have no layers. I'm going to go ahead and set some quick animation on here. Hit S. Make sure my auto key is turned on. Go ahead and move this back to here. And let's say move this over to here, frame 34, right? And then maybe I'll move it back again, right? So, if I look at my graph editor, panels, layout, 2 panes side by side, panels, and this is the graph editor. So if I look at my graph editor, this animation that I just created is pretty simple, right? where I have 62. That's good. I have all of these channels have keyframes on them, right? But there's not a lot changing on any of them, except for my translate Z, where it goes from here to here, right? So all of this is all of these keyframes that I've just created here are all on my base animation layer. But if I look at my animation layers, like none of that is visible right now. So I have it selected. I'm going to click this like new create layer from selected option here. And you'll see now I have my base animation layer, and I can add a second layer here, and we'll call it up and we'll say up down. Okay. And so when I select that animation layer, or when I select this object, you'll see that I have my base keyframes here, right? Which are all right there. But that's all under this base animation layer. I have now a whole second set of curves that I can create. And if I select my up and down, and you see that I'm on that, I don't see any keyframes on my timeline anymore, right? So my base layer, I have those keyframes on 134.62, but on my up and down layer, I don't have anything. Okay, so if I don't want to change anything on the way it looks, I can just hit S. Right? And so now I've set a keyframe with no extra animation on it at the beginning of it. And then let's go to, say, frame 30. When I'm over here, I can raise my animation up to here and hit S. And then maybe by here. So now you'll see what I'm getting is all of this animation is happening on two different layers. Right? I have my up and down layer, which is basically just changing my translate Y to here. Right? And then my base animation layer, where I'm moving my object from side to side. Now the cool part about working with this process is I can turn off layers. Right? I can click this right here and mute that up and down layer, and now I just have the original animation I had.
Michael said, would this be your effective way to do animation sets for games?
Possibly. So here's what it's really effective for, is making quick, non-destructive changes to an animation for a game. So for example, let's say you have a walk cycle, right? And it looks really good, but it's a very like vanilla walk cycle. And you also need a walk cycle where your character is more confident, and then you also need a walk cycle where your character is more sad. Well, you could actually just do that with two different animation layers, right? You could do a pose alteration on one layer that allows the character to be sort of hunched over and whatever. So let me show you as an example on this. So my character runs in and climbs up the tree, does the flip, right? So let's say what I really want is somewhere in between the beginning and like here, I want her to be looking more toward the camera, but then the rest of this through here, I want it to be the same, but I want her to land at a slightly different location, right? So I'm just going to select, I'm going to go to my animation layers. I want to make sure I have everything selected. And these are all of my curves that are on my base layer. I'm going to create a new layer. Takes it a second. And I'll call this changes. Right? So now my character has nothing on this changes layer. Right? And you'll see that each of the controls that I've selected have two sets of curves now. There's the base animation curves and the changes curves. And currently the changes curves, there's nothing there. Right? So I select the changes layer, I make sure I'm in there. I'm going to select everything. And what I know is that on frame 0 and say frame 40. 0 and 40, I don't really want anything changed, right? I want those to still look like that. So I'm just going to set a keyframe without making any changes on my changes layer on frames 0 and 40. So with everything selected, I hit S. S. Is that working? There we go. And on frame 40, I'll also hit S. Okay. So really I'm just doing that to sort of nail down the no changes have happened. I've not added anything to this animation. But that means like right here through the middle, like maybe through right here, I can make another keyframe. You don't have to keyframe everything, but I'm going to. And on that keyframe, I'm going to have her kind of turned this way a little bit. And have her head turned. There's some extra scripts running on that. Right? I have this arm back like this, right? And so just those changes means that as she runs in, she's going to be looking a little bit more to that side, and then it will eventually blend back into where we were. Right? So right through here, some of this looks a little weird to me. I could use that to continue to make changes to this. Like if I want her to keep looking like she's looking off to this side, I'm gonna uncheck this where it's trying to constantly calculate the cache. Right? And so now I get a different version of this animation. Right now she's looking this way, just with those 4 curves. Again, it's non-destructive. All of my base animation, I've not changed any of those curves. All I've done is made a second set of curves on this changes layer. And I can actually turn those off if I want to, and I'm just back at my same animation that I was at before. Right? So, with that changes, let's say I really want her to, from the point that she leaves the ground here, right? Go ahead and hit all. I'll hit S on that. I really want to change both the height of this jump and the landing location, right? So she lands right about there, right? So I know that frame 48, I want it to stay there, but on frame 59, I want her to be landing in a different place entirely, right? So let me grab the controls I need for this, that one. Let's go to perspective view so I can see this better. Foot, why can't I grab her foot control? Ugh. That control, this control, right? And so she was starting here, landing here. I want to change that to where now she is actually landing. Let's set this to world. She's actually landing. Oh, those may not need to be selected. They may be. Yeah, so I want her to land like here, and maybe over here. Right. And so now when she does this flip, she's actually going to land over there instead. To make that seem correct, I probably need to angle her a little bit more. This and this. Maybe even adjust this knee. Right. And we may need a different pose up in the air where she goes higher. Right? So she's jumping further. Right? And so now this is a completely different animation. But again, only on our animation layer. Right? So if we watch this animation now, you'll see she's looking to the side and she does a bigger jump. Right? Obviously, I messed up a lot of stuff there doing that, but these are all changes that I can make in that. And again, I can always turn it off, and now those changes aren't even there. Or I can just completely delete that layer. If you want to get really cool with it, I can actually reduce the weight of that layer to where we're only seeing like 50% of it. Right, to where we're only seeing half of the influence of that layer. We got some chat questions here. Did you turn on both layers or you turn off one? So I guess the way to think about this, Samira, is you have your base animation. Whatever's happening on the layer above it is adding to it. So when I click this little button here, I'm turning it off. So I'm turning off the changes layer. By default, the base animation layer is always going to be on. But I can turn off the changes, and then it's just an additive change that I'm not seeing anymore. Or I can turn that up and down. Does that make sense? So if I have both of them turned on, what I'm seeing is the results of both of those curves added together. Right? So I have my hips selected. This is my base curve. And then I'm also seeing my changes curve, which is just a little bit more simple, added on top of that, right? Does that make sense what's happening here?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now, why this is really handy is because we can do as many layers as we want. In fact, what some people do is, let's say you wanted to have one layer that is just like a little head shake at the end, right? I just selected her head, and I added that, and I call it head shake. And basically, I'm just going to leave everything the same, except for right here at the end, starting on frame 56, right? I could just create a curve that goes from 64 to 90, and on the rotate, is it Y? Yeah, rotate Y, I could just go in here and say keys, add key tool, and I could just add a bunch of head shake to this. Right? And let's see if that's even noticeable. I'll have to make that much bigger to make it noticeable. So I'll scale that way up. So I can see it. And so now I have this like head rotation that she does on it, right? And so that means I can control that one extra little thing on there really easily. I actually do a lot of lip sync animation in this way. So let me, Samira, yes. Can you use this technique for overlapping action and turn both layers on? So can we use... potentially. So like what you could do is like, I see what you're saying. Like if you're needing to offset keyframes, you'll have to offset them on each layer, right? But what you can use is like her ponytail, right? If I wanted to just do an overlapping action pass on the ponytail, I could turn on the control for that. I don't know where that's at. No. I could turn on the, wherever it's at, turn on the ponytail control and be able to animate that by itself just on its own layer. So I'm going to show you something that I've done for a project. Let me open this up. Because I'm showing you all this, I may end up putting this as unlisted just so people don't stumble across it too easily. It's not really that secretive of a project, but still. Character. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to do animations. And I will do... Who's a good one? Let's try Henry. open, don't save. So I used animation layers a lot on this one. And so you can use them to fix things, but you can also use them, the materials are not going to show up very well. You can use them to fix things, but you can also use them to create things, right? So let's go to my perspective camera so you can see this. So for example, I have this character who is at the beginning of this animation. What is happening? Oh, there we go. So at the beginning of this animation, I have this walk cycle that he's doing, right? But I have let me open this up here. Game exporter. I have a list of several animations that he does that all have lip sync, right? And so this is where the layering works out really well. So the animation as it is right now is him doing this like talking, and he does this little gesture, right? But let me show you how this animation was constructed, because I have a whole bunch of different layers on here. Right? So I'm going to turn all of those off so you can see that at its base, this animation is actually just an idle. Right? So the character is just idling in place. Can't really see anything on this other base animation layer. So the second animation layer I have, so with this, like all he's doing is just sort of that same idle like you would do for a game set, right? For this body acting layer, I just animated his arm sort of going up and hitting in this pose and then sort of settling back. He's also got this little head shake and this little nod that he does there, right? And so that's what happens when I turn on the body acting pose. For the lip sync layer, that's where I did only the lip sync on his mouth, right? And then I did another layer on top of that called mouth emote, and that's where I can give him a little bit of emotion. Let's see if you can actually see any changes in that. Not a lot. You can add like smile and like frown and stuff like that onto his mouth if I wanted to. And then the final layer I added was just some brows, like some stuff that changes the way his eyebrows move, right? So to kind of talk about like, I don't remember who asked this. I think maybe it was Michael asked this earlier, like using it for game animations. So a good example of this is, let's say I wanted to do another version of this walk cycle, right? So I currently have this walk cycle where he's just kind of walking in place, or sort of walking in place, right? Let's say I wanted to do one where he was a little bit more depressed, right? Well, I have all the controllers selected. I can add a layer. It's going to take it a minute. There we go. And we'll call this one emotion layer, right? And what I can do is just on one frame, I'll probably want to make sure that like if I go back a frame or two. So let's say on frame 497, I'll hit S, and then a little bit after that, I'm just doing this so I don't mess up my other animations before and after this. So on 497, I hit S. It's going to take it a minute. Yeah. And then on 561, I'll hit S. There we go. So if I just go back to my walk base, which is from 500 to 542, I can make changes to what's happening on frame 500, right? I can hit S on that to just key everything. Just give it a second here. Sorry, I know this part isn't very exciting. There we go. So now that I've made those changes, or now that I've got this keyframe on here, I can make changes on this keyframe, right? If I wanted this walk cycle to have the character looking... What is happening? There we go. This is a rig issue. It's actually going to work fine. I just have to adjust it. So if I make these changes on that layer, you'll see now he's looking up, right? Maybe I could even push him a little bit. I'm going to do that. Further back like this. So have him like really looking up, like he's like looking at something in the sky. Select all those controls. I'll right click, copy those. So I have a keyframe at the beginning and the end that is that corrected pose. Right? And so now you'll see I have that whole animation with him looking up during the middle of it. Right? And again, all of that change is just on this emotion layer, because if I turn that off, I just have my normal pose again. Right? If I wanted to do another variation of that, I could even add another layer, and I can turn these on and off and try different ones. So how do you export with layers? So when you export to a game engine, it's going to bake all of those layers down into a single set of curves. Right? But if you want to double, that doesn't mean you have to leave the layers in there. So one of the options you can do, I'll show you this on the simpler shot with the sphere first, so it'll be faster, is I have these two layers, right, where there's the up and down layer that we did and the side to side layer. Right? If I really wanted all of that to be baked down into one curve, I can just select both of them, right click, and go to merge layers, and I'm going to choose my options box here. Where did my options box go? I do not see it. They go up here. I click merge layers options box. Ah, there it is. So if you ever do that and it opens it up off screen, it's Alt space M arrow, and that'll hook it to your mouse so you can drag it around. Assuming I've done that, I've got those two, right click, let me just show you one more time. Right click, merge layers, choose your options box. I want to make sure Smart Bake is turned on, and then hit merge. And what it's going to do is it's going to bake both of those layers down into one curve, or one set of keys, right? And so really that's all that's happening, because when you export in a game engine, it just takes where the bones are on every frame and sets a keyframe on all of the joints before exporting them out. It bakes it out to the skeleton, right? So for my character here with the with all the different layers in it, if I wanted to bake all of this down into one layer, I could do that by selecting all of those, merge layers, and do Smart Bake and hit merge. I realize though by doing that I may have just locked up Maya, because there's a lot of layers on there, so it'll probably take it a little while to bake it all down. But it'll merge all of that into a single animation layer with all of the curves in there. So that's actually pretty cool, which means you can use this to very quickly make some changes, like when we were doing that with our girl running up the tree. I can use it to make some very big changes, bake that down to a single layer, and then polish the curves on that single layer. Does that make sense? Okay. So, all right. Any questions about layers? I have a feeling I just killed Maya.
I got a question.
Okay.
when it comes to layers, what do you use them mostly for? Like face?
Um, and well, in this example here that I used with this guy, I used what I had to do is to get a lot of animations done quickly, right? So I use them for the face animation, and I do sometimes use them for lip sync stuff, but usually they don't come into play that much for me until I get a little further along in the process, right? So a lot of times I use them for correcting something or for fixing something or for reuse of something. Um, but a lot of people use them, that's just my personal way of using them. A lot of people use them to layer uh, the things that they work on, right? So, for example, you're setting keyframes on all of your controls, right? Rather than go back and delete keyframes on the hair or the fingers, they will just do the finger animation in a separate layer, right? And I mean, there's a lot of different ways to use them. I don't know that I know lots of people who don't use them at all, and I mean, lots of professional animators who are doing this every day who don't use them at all. Actually, I would say more than not don't use them. I feel like that was like a triple negative or something, but there's a lot of people who just don't use them because they feel like they're complicated. But once you start using them, you're like, wait, this isn't as complicated as I thought. And the cool thing about it is I can make big changes to my animation without that change being permanent, right? Because I can always just turn off that layer, or just delete that layer if I wanted to. So, yeah, I've totally froze up Maya at this point. So, other questions y'all have on this?
I had a quick question that I don't know how well you'll be able to answer it.
Okay.
More of using the layers for like different stages for like blocking, and then doing another layer for blocking plus,
Mm-hmm.
and then another layer to add on to that.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, merge it down to do the splining. Would that be effective at all, or would that just be kind
I
of
did that before. It was hard.
Yeah,
It got very tricky.
Yeah, I think the problem with that is, let me kind of show you. I need just something to draw on. Rectangular snip. Here we go. So let's say the animation layer 1, right? You have a keyframe on frame 1 and frame 10 and frame 5. So let's say 1, 5, and 10. You know that you have 1, 5, and 10 locked down, right? So this is animation layer 1. So you know exactly where everything is on frame 1, 5, and 10 because you set a keyframe on everything. Well, let's say you do animation layer 2, right? And for animation layer 2, you have a keyframe on frame 1 and let's say 7 and 10, right? Well, the transition that happens from 1 to 7, because you haven't nailed anything down on 5, like let's say you're moving something from point A to point B on 7, that means the layer that is where it's transitioning from 1 to 7 here, that's going to propagate down to 5, and it's going to change what your key pose looked like on 5. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically what you're saying is the higher the animation layer and number, it kind of overwrites the lower one?
Yeah. Now you can make them absolute. Right now I think they're all set to additive, but basically whatever's on the upper layer will add to what is on the layers below it. Like where I use it for stuff like that though, is if I want to add like a layer of texture to the motion, right? Like a good example I say is like I did an animation where a character was like really proud, and he did this like like that gesture, and the arc was perfect. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. Right. All I wanted was that little shimmy at the end of it, of the arm shaking. Right. And so I just created an animation layer that just had the shimmy in it, and then I could scale that shimmy up and down. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know. I think if you're going to use it in the blocking plus phases, some people will use it based more on like body part, right? Let's say you're blocking past. How to say this? Like this is one of the workarounds for when people are blocking too quickly and they forget to do anything to the fingers, right? Is that you could go in and do, let's say you did all of your body parts and you just did the arms, the legs, the torso, and the head, right? And you've put in like 30 keyframes or whatever, and you realize you haven't done anything to the hands and they're all just like this on every frame, right? Well, you could do a layer that is just the fingers, and just do like the key poses that you want to hit on the fingers on top of that, and then bake that down to your base layer if you wanted to. Later on, though, I use it a lot for secondary action and for like little, like a tail or a hair or ponytail or like fabric and all of that stuff. Just because then you can kind of isolate that onto its own layer, and you only have to worry about those keyframes. Okay. Other questions about any of this? Okay. Yeah, Maya's definitely frozen. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get out of this screen share here, so we can go back to just this Shark Boy and Lava Girl. So I think that's most of what I planned on. What now?
Lava Girl?
Shark Boy and Lava. Somebody wrote Michael wrote Shark Boy and Lava Girl is better than Spy Kids. It's you like to fight in the playground type of talk.
If it's so good, then why does it only have one movie?
Dim's fighting words, boy.
It's so good. Why does it?
I mean, it doesn't need a sequel,
Yeah.
in my opinion. But I always loved the first Spy Kids movie, so I don't know.
So,
what would the sequel like even be? Like,
yeah.
They had to replace the actors, so
all grown up.
it'd be really weird.
What if it's like they now work in a law firm and they
no, because like they were all imaginary except for the kid.
Remember the protagonist is like
They're all
down
made up.
Oh, okay. Was that a spoiler? Did you just run Shark Boy and Lava?
No, that's established at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, if you're interested in watching, so I don't know.
It's okay.
It sounds like some nice junk food to watch that will let me turn off the world around me for a few days or so.
George Lopez is
The
in it.
CGI in it is really wacky.
I mean, it was back then, so.
I mean, it's good for the time, but it's still really wacky.
It was one of those. It's one of those Robert Rodriguez movies where it's like, hey, let's make everything CG except for the actors.
Yeah. Oh, there was a movie that came out when I was in high school called The Lawnmower Man. Anybody ever seen any of that?
I've heard of it.
I heard of it.
Oh man, it was bad. So the weird thing about it is it's based off of a Stephen King short story that's like 5 pages long.
Yeah.
And has absolutely nothing to do with what the movie is about. Because the movie's about like this guy getting sucked into virtual reality, and like it's like it makes no sense at all. But the whole thing, like the main character in it becomes like this CG character, and it looks so bad. Like it did not date well at all. It has very little to do with lawnmowers. All right, so
all just ages fast.
Yeah, it does.
Like 10 years from now, the stuff that we think is going to be high tech is going to be very, very bad looking in comparison.
I
See,
think
that's what scares me. Is I was looking at Animal Crossing and I'm like, wow, I used to not play video games because I hated the way 3D looked. And then I'm like, 10 years from now, I'm gonna hate the way this looks, and that broke me.
Nah, yeah. I remember when the Super NES came out, 16-bit, and Parker. When the Super NES came out, we would watch like the games on it and be like, "It looks just like a cartoon. Can you believe how realistic this looks?"
Realistic,
Hey,
yeah.
To be fair, I still like the way Super Nintendo games
I do
look.
too.
I think that's some of the best pixel arts.
Oh yeah.
I would consider that realistic.
Yeah.
It's like the height of it's probably the height of that era of all the pixel art based games during
Then
that
the
time.
Genesis.
Yeah, see, Super NES was my that was my go-to. I mean, I had the NES, but the Super NES is where it was at for me.
I do like me some Sega Genesis. I'll say that.
Yeah. All right. Well, anybody? We can probably go ahead and start to wrap up the class today. Anybody have any other comments, questions, concerns?
Parker, what's in your background? Is that Forrest Gump?
Yeah, it's Forrest Gump.
Parker's gonna run. Run, Parker, run.
Parker, I swear, you're gonna be our main guy with Greg.
Yeah. I showed my wife.
I didn't realize I ended up in that until way later. And I was
That
like,
was such a huge chain of events.
I showed my wife that progression, and she was like, "What have you done?"
We were just trying to figure out just the server picture, and then me, Chris, and Sierra posted our things, and then Chris decided to compile everything together, and I was just like, "Oh my gosh!"
Yeah, it just continued to grow. So.
I've never been a meme before.
Yeah.
Get used to it, buddy.
Yeah. Well, so speaking of which, does anybody want to? We had Hat Day. Anybody got any recommendations for next class period?
Hawaiian shirt day.
I don't have a Hawaiian shirt.
I don't have that.
Okay.
I can airmail you mine.
I don't know, but I vote on the last day we have a pizza party.
Oh, just everybody.
A self pizza party. Everyone
I got a
orders
bunch
their
of
own
Tostino's pizzas down in the basement in the freezer. So
bagel bites. Oh.
The bagel bites.
We could
Will
do
there be vegan options.
Vegan option? I don't know. It depends on what's at your house right now. Like,
we could say that Greg's buying while we buy our own stuff.
Yeah, wouldn't that be weird? I'm like, I'm gonna buy a pizza for a pizza party, and then we show up, and I have like 7 pizzas behind me. I'm like, what's going on, y'all? No, no, we can. Yeah, if anybody has any ideas of ways to mix it up, keep it fun.
I don't know if people have stuffed animals, but I have tons of stuffed animals here to show off.
I like it. Show and tell day. Tomorrow's show and tell day. Or Tuesday
I
show
have
and tell day.
fish.
Fish?
Yeah, you got fish.
Yeah.
Did he jump out yet?
Hey, fish, turn around.
Okay, I'm happy for you.
Yeah, he's alive. I don't see
Like I
him.
said, my beta when I had him when he was still among this world, Rip Nathan Jr. He used to jump out of his tank.
No, this guy doesn't jump. He just sits there. He loves daddy.
I hope somebody was recording that for their lip sync piece.
Are you recording this video, Greg?
I am. Oh yeah, I am. So all right, y'all. Well,
Okay.
if anybody has any questions or anything, let me know. Again, if you need to meet up, sort of outside of class, we can set up a time period to meet in Zoom. I'm going to try to start opening up my Zoom meeting pretty often, but if you go in there, it's not open, send me a quick message and I can always open it up within usually within a few minutes. I should be here in the house. I think that's what the order is now, is that I should stay here in the house. My wife still has to go to work. She's part of medical, so she's at work today. So, but otherwise, I'll be here. So, all right, y'all. I'll let y'all go so you can get some lunch because Parker talking about pizza has got me wanting lunch now. But I'll see y'all Tuesday, and we'll do it again.
Tuesday, Thursday.
Thursday, that's the one.
Are
Thursday.
you going somewhere Thursday?
Am I?
You're not allowed to leave your house.
You're not
Max.
allowed
Where
to
you going?
leave.
Maybe the back porch. I don't know. I could.
Ooh.
I think it's
try.
supposed to be sunny, isn't it?
Maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe my show and tell will be my backyard. So,
You'll let us shoot reference in. I'll make sure to be 6 feet away from you when I'm doing weird stuff.
yep.
It'll be
I can show you. I can show you the railroads outside.
Exactly. Well, if you don't have anything for show and tell, feel free to go ahead and start doing crayon drawings or anything else that you would like to bring in show.
I could show you the drawing I was working on.
Yeah, any of that works.
I got a ton of show and tell stuff.
Ton of show and tell stuff.
I'm going to dig the saxophone out of the closet.
I have to see what's the weirdest thing I own, because I own a lot of weird stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the machete is just like the tip of the iceberg.
I feel like the machete like is yeah. Yeah, bring it on. Whatever,
I can show you this. Should I show it to you now?
Well, you're gonna spoil it now. You gotta. It's like Christmas, Parker. Like,
this is
okay, he's gonna show it.
Autograph.
Parker is just too excited.
Oh, it's Dusty.
Is that Ed Sheeran? Did Ed Sheeran
Ed
sign
Asner.
Oh, okay.
Ed Sheeran?
No, it's Ed Asner,
No.
the voice
Yeah.
of Carl Fredrickson.
Carl.
Oh, that's cool. Where did you get that?
Pixar.
Oh, well.
My aunt knew this guy. My aunt knew
You just
this
stole that from
guy
Pixar.
who knew this lady who had a cousin who got married, but she worked at Pixar.
Oh.
I don't know why getting married had anything to do with that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
His name, Bob Robertson. He was the voice of Doug and also one of the directors for Up.
Oh,
My
cool.
best friend, her dad went to high school with them, and they're still Facebook friends.
Ooh.
Bob Peterson?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, y'all got see these.
He went to school with Mr. Klein.
These are your ends. This is why networking is so important. So
Yep.
spend some of your time.
Bob Peterson, storyboard artist. He's a cool dude.
Spend some of this time while you're at home setting up your LinkedIn account. So.
Hey, if you see any more of those free lectures, please let me know.
Oh, absolutely.
That
There
was
are actually
fantastic.
there are several of them going around. I actually had it opened up. I was going to watch it, but every time I hit start, something else comes up. But it seems pretty good. For those of you who didn't see, Jarrett shared that in the Discord, the game lecture. And so, could you give us any notes about that? Anything that you saw, or anything that was kind of the overview?
I wrote down some notes. Like, for the most part, the lecture was basically about like sequencer, but he was also talking about how to do like triggered events as well. And
cool.
he talked a lot about like cinematography, and he personally does his cameras in Maya and exports them to Unreal.
Cool.
But he was talking about some of the different things. But so some of the notes I wrote down, like he was talking about like demo reels, and he said for like a game animator, like cycles are very important, but also just having like variety in the sense of like death animations or those kind of weird ones that you don't really see or per se, I don't know, but yeah, he said variety is a big thing for game animators. So
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. Actually, Hayden just asked a question too. I have sent emails to Livingston and Todd for an honors college related thing and haven't heard anything yet. I will meet with them on Thursday, but I would say if you've sent them an email, is it just are you trying to get an honors class set up?
I'm supposed to do honors effects animation, and I need to do thesis class next semester. I don't know who to meet for that.
Gotcha. We can kind of talk about some more of this offline if we need to. The honors thesis class has to be set up with Radina. Like she has to create that class for you, I think. and you have to fill out some paperwork for that. But yeah, Todd is the person you'll need to talk to about that.
Okay.
When did you email him?
For last Friday.
Last Friday. So, wait, not 4 days ago, but like a long time ago.
I think it would be 4 days ago.
Okay, not the week before that though. Yes. Well, so here's what could very easily happen, because like for me, Friday we had a bunch of meetings all weekend long. Like, so, we may have not been checking our email as much, and then yesterday may have been the day he's like getting caught up on everything. So what I would say is Wednesday or so, send them a little nudge email and be like, hey, just making sure you got my previous email. But I can if we have a meeting on Friday, but I don't know. I'll try my best to remember if you haven't heard from them by then. But really, email is probably going to be the best way to get in touch with them. And so yeah, just send them a nudge email, and I'm sure they're getting a lot of emails right now.
Okay.
So the other thing, what you would do with your honors, so everybody else is just getting to ride along on this conversation a little bit. So what you'll end up doing on your honors project, though, is you have to fill out this paperwork where you say this is what you're planning on doing for your honors project, and this is the person who is going to be my thesis advisor. And so you'll need to work that out with Todd. I think he'll give you the paperwork, but whoever it is you're wanting to be your thesis advisor will have to sign that too. And since it's all remote now, I'm not for sure. Maybe he's trying to get the PDFs or something set up for that.
Okay.
So the reason I kind of had everybody ride along on that is so Hayden in this class and Maggie and the other class are both doing the honors enriched version of the class, which requires an extra research project and a presentation. And so Hayden actually just sent me his, and I'm probably going to share it with you all as well. So basically, the whole point of it is that the people who are in the honors enriched class does an extra research project that the entire class can benefit from. So since we've kind of had to switch gears a little bit on this one, his was on a person. It was on Miyazaki and Studio Ghibli. Am I saying that right? Ghibli?
I think it's Ghibli.
So he did a little 5-minute presentation video about it, and I'll send that out to everybody.
Who did you do it on?
Studio Ghibli, and then more specifically, Miyazaki himself.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so it's kind of an overview history look at it. So yeah, I'll send. I can send that out around so everybody else can kind of watch those. And when Maggie gets hers up and going.
Did you talk about his Lupin work?
Lupin.
I don't think I actually did.
You should have, because that was his first movie that he ever did.
Yeah. Anyway.
So anyway, that's one of the reasons to do it, though, so you get some more insight on it and stuff like that, in case you do decide you want to do a revision on it or anything. So yeah, I'll send that around. I'm not sure if I'll send it as an email, if I'll put it in Discord, or if I'll put it in D2L. But yeah, if y'all could get a chance to watch that and give Hayden some feedback on that.
Being serious for a second, I one of my strengths is actually animation history, so you actually do need someone to like proofread your thing to make sure it's like pretty decently accurate. I could look over it for a second and have it reviewed over by a couple of people too that know a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Just so you put in like the most accurate information. You don't like leave out anything important.
Okay, that'd be awesome.
Cool. And so we anyway, I want to share it with everybody too, because it's a nice way of how these honors classes work, is that basically you get an extra, it's like you get a freebie out of the class, a little extra lecture, an extra piece of information. So I'll probably share whatever Maggie does hers on with everybody as well. So all right, y'all, Any last minute things before we hop off here?
Nope.
I dreamed in Zoom meeting last night. Like I've been in so many Zoom meetings that my dream was actually all of these squares like this. It was, yeah.
Wait, can you see us all in squares? Oh,
I could see Parker. I could
That's how
see
you do
Greg. Right over there is Nicholas. Right down
there's a
below
button at
on
the
the
top
very
that
bottom
says
is
gallery
Tanner.
view.
Yeah.
The
Hey,
Brady
Greg.
Bunch.
Yes,
I
Sarah.
had a dream that, well, it wasn't technically you, it was another professor, said that they would give us A's as long as we loved Hayden with all of our heart. And I think that we should implement that.
Yeah, Sierra, good idea.
Because I love my Hayden.
I think that is technically part of the pass fail policy, if I recall correctly. Yeah.
You write a detailed essay about your thoughts on Hayden.
Exactly. All right,
Can't wait.
Reminder for people attending next semester: registration starts next week. Good point, Eli.
Registration, yes, do it.
Hey,
also, this isn't registration, but tax day is when FAFSAs are due. So if you haven't actually finished your FAFSA for fall 2020, for those who are going into next semester, do that before the 15th.
That reminds me
you're not going to get the first. You won't be the first considered.
I don't have to do any of this. It's so weird.
That reminds me that I need to do taxes.
Yeah, it is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Do you know how stressful it is?
Yeah, we've had to do it. We've had to do it multiple times.
Well, the other thing to consider too is if you decide you want to go to grad school, you still need to do FAFSA. So that is something to consider.
Have an animation grad program?
So, good question. So not yet.
Okay.
We are on track to have one for fall of 2021, and it would be an MFA in digital media. It wouldn't be animation specifically. You would pick what it's about. There's not a concentration in the master's program, basically, but that means you can focus on whatever you want. And so we have one proposed. It's been accepted at the first level, but we got to get the whole thing through the process by fall of 2021. So,
when would you guys know about that?
I think it's been put into the system. Hopefully, we'll start to learn about its progress over the next few weeks here. Really, the only thing that would knock it off track is, a giant pandemic or something. So,
That'll never happen.
Well, what happens is it has to go through multiple approval processes all the way up to the state level, and what could end up happening is if they postpone the board meeting for TBR or something like that, then that means we would have to wait 3 extra months, which means we would miss some other deadlines, which means it may not happen at that time. But it will happen. Our hope is that it happens fall of 2021. Worst case scenario, we would put it off till fall of 2022. We want to start in the fall. That way you kind of go through, not as an official cohort, but as everybody starting in the fall. That way we can keep the class lists sort of clean, and it also lets you sort of advertise in the spring, accept people toward the end of the spring, and that way they have the summer to relocate and stuff like that. So, yeah, it would be really cool. I'm super excited about it when it happens. The cool thing about an MFA, for those of you who are unfamiliar, teaching at the college level requires a master's degree. So to be an adjunct, you can have any master's degree and teach at the bachelor's level. But to be a professor, to be pretty much a full-time teacher, requires a terminal master's degree or a terminal degree in some sort. And so a master's of science is not terminal because there's a higher degree than that. There's a doctorate of science. But an MFA is a terminal degree. So that means if you get an MFA, you can teach at the college level. So it opens up some other Yeah, you could be a Greg. Actually, so I mean, I have a whole interesting story about how that works, because when I first started here as a lecturer, I didn't have a terminal degree, and so that's one of the reasons I've been a big proponent of getting it, is because it makes your future life easier if you decide you want to go into teaching. So, all right, y'all, I'm gonna have to get some lunch before my next class. I think it's peanut butter and jelly. It's gonna be peanut butter and jelly.
You do what you can.
Yeah.
Hi, Greg.
Peanut butter jelly time.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an ancient one.
Could be stuck in my head all day.
All day long. Okay, cool. Well, I'll talk to y'all soon. Or, well, I'll talk to y'all Thursday or earlier if you happen to swing by one of the Zoom meetings. So, see ya.
Bye, Greg.
Bye, Greg.
Bye, Greg.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Goodbye.